Governor Mark Dayton issued a series of executive orders with the intent of improving child safety. During a news conference, he brought up the case of a tragic death of a 4-year-old Starbuck boy to highlight his actions.
The picture of 4-year-old Eric Dean smiling at the camera, despite a visible wound on his face, will haunt me for a long time. The StarTribune story that reported his repeated abuse and finally his death said, quote, "Records show that by the time Eric died at age 4 in February 2013, 15 reports had been filed on his behalf. The county's Child Protection Agency investigated only one, after the boy's arm was broken in 2011, and found no maltreatment. According to records, only one report was shared with police, despite state law directing that law enforcement should be notified of all suspected abuse reports. Minnesota has positive reports on the caliber of its child protection services in comparison with other states around the country. In 2014, Minnesota ranked 5th in the nation for the overall educational, social, economic, and physical well-being of its children, according to the Annie E. Casey Foundation's Kids Count data book. Minnesota's child fatality rate of 0.78% per 100,000 is much lower than the national average of 2.2% per 100,000. On the other hand, Minnesota falls short of the norm in its follow-through on suspected and documented cases of child abuse. One emergency room physician recently wrote, quote, as an emergency department physician, I am a mandated reporter for concerns of child abuse. When I make a report, however, my heart sinks because my perception is that a large majority of the cases are screened out or not accepted. Facts support my perception. 29% of cases reported in Minnesota are accepted for further review versus 62% nationwide. Why? My partners and I have years of training and medical experience. And when we report concern about a child's well-being, it should be taken seriously. I agree. And we will immediately institute the following steps to strengthen the state's oversight of child abuse reporting and also to improve the decisions that are presently being made by county social workers. The Department of Human Services will immediately begin monthly and random reviews of county screening decisions, which are the initial choices county protection workers make about whether or not to investigate allegations of child abuse. 2, recognizing that child protection requires difficult judgment calls and expertise. A rapid consultation system staffed by county and state specialists will be set up for county workers who need expert advice as they do their work. This new support system will be operated by counties and by the Department of Human Services. 3rd, I'm forming a task force on the protection of children. It will be co-chaired by State Commissioner of Human Services, Lucinda Jesson, and Ramsey County Commissioner Tony Carter, who is also president of the Association of Minnesota Counties. And I'll ask the two of them to describe the task force's mission and their work.
Thank you so much, Governor. As you pointed out, Minnesota does rank high when it comes to child well-being overall. And our excellent child protection system really is one of the reasons for the success. But while we save thousands of children, what we have seen is still far too many children fall through the cracks, suffering maltreatment and even death. So we need to take steps immediately, working with the counties to address this. I think the governor outlined the 2 immediate steps we're going to take. First, the monthly random reviews, where we'll be reviewing, starting in early October, review of September decisions, 240 of them at least, to look and see, 1, where is our system working and where is it failing? But also giving us the opportunity to immediately intervene in decisions where state protocols are not being followed. Our second step, the availability of a rapid consultation process staffed by state and county experts who will really be able to provide expert and peer support for tough decisions that social workers have to make. We will be announcing the process to access that service within the next 2 weeks. I'm delighted to co-chair a comprehensive evaluation of Minnesota's child protection system, and delighted to be doing that with Commissioner Tony Carter. We will be reaching out to other experts. The child protection system is not just about human services. It involves law enforcement. It involves the physicians and other mandated reporters in the school, for example. So our task force will reach out to get the expertise we need from across the system, including legislators, child advocates, experts in child protection, law enforcement, county human services directors. We will be announcing the makeup of that shortly. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to AMC President, Commissioner Tony Carter.
Thank you very much. On behalf of counties, I want to thank our governor and the Commissioner of Human Services for this action to protect Minnesota's children. Counties do this very important work of child protection, knowing that it is some of the most critical, some of the most difficult, and some of the most important work that we can do. When one child is in danger, counties, our workers, administrators, and all grieve with the children and families. One child is too many. Although counties have been working already dedicatedly with the state and Department of Human Services on improving our child protection system, we welcome this opportunity for additional support to do so. This is a place where counties place countless resources to ensure that children are safe, and yet some children have yet been placed at peril. We welcome the opportunity for the oversight, for the random review, for additional technical assistance across counties, and we welcome the formation of a task force, which I am privileged to chair, along with Commissioner Cindy Jesson. We look forward to keeping all of our children safe. We welcome the engagement together with us in this work of all parties who have been mentioned. Protecting our children is not simply a county responsibility. It is one of the most important things, perhaps the most important thing, that we as a community can do. Thank you so very much.
So we'll open up to questions on this particular subject, and I'll open it up to general questions.
Question for the commissioner.
We have two commissioners here.
Is it the case at the moment that DHS encourages counties to refer 75% of the incidents to family assessment, and wouldn't that need to either go away or be significantly modified to make this work?
What DHS does is establish protocols so that counties make decisions on when cases should be what they would call screened in, so we're going to go out and assess the child's safety, and when a call of doesn't merit going into the child's home. We establish the protocols. We don't establish percentages around those.
There's no percent.
There's no quota. I think one of the things it really gives us the opportunity to do, because at the department what we've done is say, here are the protocols we want you to use. We do training on those protocols, and we do quality improvement sessions. But I think this gives us really the opportunity to step back and say, how is that working? Is it what's working well, and what needs to change in that? And that's why I think kind of these random reviews, as well as kind of the broader look from the task force, will be important. And if you look at the governor's executive order, you'll notice, since you raised the issue of those screening decisions and family assessment, that that's one of the first things the governor is asking the task force to do, and asking them to come back with recommendations to him and the legislature by the end of the year.
Commissioner, Minnesota just changed its law. What happened here that resulted in a 4-year-old boy dying?
Minnesota put into law would have been a screening practice for years and years. And I think that we need to take a look at that practice, absolutely. But that is really a small part of the child protection system, and we need to look at the broader system, not including, are the screening practices we're making, are they working in the right way? Are those protocols being followed? And if they're being followed and not with good results, then we need to take a new look at the protocols.
Well, I ask again, what happened here that caused the death of this 4-year-old boy?
I think that's something that we've asked our child mortality review panel to look at. We're bringing a lot of experts in to look at the specific case of what happened with Eric Dean, what went wrong, because clearly things happened here that should not have happened. The governor referenced the failure to make reports to law enforcement. That's one example. So we are looking very specifically through the child mortality review at the Eric Dean case, but I think what the task force is doing will be informed by that work, but should take a broader look at our whole child protection system.
I just want to say that in this case, that law certainly needs to be examined and will be. But in my opinion, that law is not responsible for what occurred with Eric Dean. I mean, there are 15 instances of child abuse suspected, and only one was reported to the police as was required by law. Anybody who was involved in that situation over the period of the 2 years where these abuses occurred and was acting with professional responsibility would have recognized a pattern here that needed to be given additional scrutiny, and that didn't occur. So I think this is a failure of people, not of legislation.
Was it a failure, though, of the DHS guidelines and screening policy to not look at past reports, getting a new one?
That's something, as the commissioner said, that will be reviewed, and statute was changed, went through hearings and consideration by a lot of well-intended people who thought this was better served the interests of children as well as families. And obviously we've had the experience now where it probably was a factor, although I think a minor factor in the outcome with Eric Dean. So we'll take a look at that, learn from that experience, and make changes that are called for.
Through its random screenings, if the DHS comes across a decision that was made improperly, a screening decision, can it reverse it?
If we come across a screening decision that's not following state protocols, we'll immediately call the Human Service Director and have it make sure appropriate action is taken in that case.
Is it your expectation that, given these random screenings, more counties will take cases further down the line in investigation to avoid being kind of caught up in this situation where their decisions will be second-guessed?
I think when we do our review, we'll review how those screening decisions are made, looking at what's properly screened in as well as things that are properly are screened out. So I think my hope is that knowing there's yet an additional set of eyes on this, that the appropriate screening decisions will be made. We don't want children taken out of their homes unnecessarily when they shouldn't be, but we certainly want to make sure that safety of the child is paramount.
You want to comment?
Simply that there is no plain vanilla answer to this. Clearly, counties are concerned with the safety first of our children and with ensuring that children are safe short-term and also long-term. So it is a very difficult circumstance for counties to be in. We welcome the additional scrutiny to ensure that the appropriate decisions are being made, and that will be the effort of counties moving forward.
Has there been any suggestion or evidence that counties either have inadequate staffing or resources to conduct adequate screening of complaints that come in?
I would say that counties have placed a priority on ensuring that their resources are directed toward this work that is so very important, and that we continue to look to our state and federal partners for the support that they can provide. Again, this is an opportunity for us together to scrutinize exactly what resources may be missing and needed within counties so that we can work together as partners across these systems to make certain our children are safe. And thank you for that question.
Commissioner, could you discuss how the county specialists, what kind of qualifies them maybe more so or differently than the people at the county workers that they'll be helping out?
I would say that it may be, and we will discover this and be able to best answer as we go through this process, that counties may, in some cases, have all of the resources that they need in terms of the specialist that actually examine these cases, it may be that some counties can actually use more assistance in that regard. We'll be working to determine and to share with you as we go through this process exactly what that is.
Commissioner, can you give us some kind of context as to how big this problem is? How many complaints are made, how many investigations are done, and how many are then forwarded on for action?
I am so sorry that I cannot give you those details today. However, we can certainly follow up to ensure that you have the information.
In general, is it, are there a lot and then very few go over?
There are 10 reported fatalities in 2013 in Minnesota. I assume those are not natural deaths. I assume those are deaths caused by some questionable occurrence, and that's again statistically that's relatively low compared to other states of comparable size, but it's 10 too many.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are the county workers overwhelmed by so many complaints that it's difficult to weed them out, difficult to know what to do and what not to do?
I think one of the things that the task force will look at, and one of those first 3 things we'll look at and make recommendations by the end of the year is there adequate capacity and resources for the system? I mean, that is a very good question. There have been, the counties end up paying for about half of overall of our child welfare system in the state of Minnesota. State resources, have been cut back in that area across the last 10, if you look back across the last 10 years. So I think that's a very fair question that we will look at. Just to give you a sense of, you're asking about the context. So when I said that we were going to do random audits of at least 240 calls that are made to child protection, calls that are then either kind of screened in or screened out, either decide we're going to investigate it or not, that's about 5% of all of the calls that are made to child protection. So I think that starts to give you a sense of the magnitude of the information that's coming at county workers.
There's a lot of focus on screenings and protocol and the task force. What about the kids that could potentially be pulled out of abusive situations? Do you have a plan on where they will go?
Thank you. And that has always, of course, been the case as cases are screened in and a decision may be made to remove a child from the home. We have resources, including foster parents, that are willing to take these children into their homes and care for them while the investigation is in process and until determinations can be made. We continue to seek appropriate resources for that work, and that is a part of the role, of course, that our community plays to ensure that we are able to have the partnerships that will care for these children. An important part of the work is determining, of course, and this gets very difficult, when and whether reunification can take place. Our desire is that children are in the arms of protective, loving, and caring parents or guardians, and that is the work that counties do, working with temporary partners and working hopefully to ensure that children are in permanent hands. Thank you.
Will the results of the monthly random screenings be made public?
We will provide the summary information from those, our thinking, but we will be talking with the task force about this, is to do 3 months of those, and then assess, kind of, can we look at trends, what's working, what's not working, are things working differently in different parts of the state? But as I said, we're not going to wait till 3 months to intervene if we see a decision that we think is being made that's wrong.
DHS has also said that it's going to investigate Polk County's actions in the Airdine case. Will that report be made public?
I cannot recall around exactly what of the child mortality review is public and what's not, but I'm happy to get back to you on that. And Aaron Sullivan Sutton's in the back of the room. She probably has a more exact answer of, how much of that will become public and won't. The Data Practices Act just addresses that specifically.
If the state discovers that a particular county or counties are particularly deficient when screening out cases or screening them in, does the state have any power to replace or remove officials that are involved in those decisions at the county level?
That's really several steps ahead of where we are. I think the first thing we need to do is really kind of get the information in front of us, really engage the whole task force to look at it and say, what can we learn from this?
But if the public wants to know if these people on the ground are being held accountable, what can you tell them?
I think that from my perspective, counties do take this very seriously now. And, and overall, let's do recall that, as the governor started out by saying, our child well-being is one of the top states in the country. Our child protection system is a good reason for that. That I think that is something that county boards, certainly at the state, that we all take very seriously. That's why we want to do more to improve it. And if that improvement means we need additional resources, then we need additional resources. If it means that we need more accountability, as you're suggesting, built into the system, then that's what we need to do.
But I think it would help people understand if you're conducting this review, what authority, if any, does the state have to deal effectively with problems that come up?
Right. Well, the state supervises the counties in their child protection work, so we do have authority to address problems with the counties when they come to our attention.
The employers of county employees are the county boards, and they would have the ultimate authority and responsibility to decide who's qualified to serve in their positions and who's not. And additionally, if there's a allegation or a belief that there's been illegal activity on someone's part, then that's a role for the county attorney also to play. So the state is separate from those processes, except for, correct me if I'm wrong here, but except for supervision and review. But we certainly can communicate and will communicate with county boards, for example. If there's a pattern of somebody not performing, then we'll definitely bring that to the attention of the county board, and I assume it'll come to public light, and then the public itself can put the appropriate pressure on county officials to act. And we'll, as part of this review, we'll look and see, does the state need some kind of preemptive ability to override and act independently of the county boards? But this, as the commissioner said, that's premature to be making that assessment now.
Will the task force include anybody that's not currently in the child protection system or related systems in Minnesota? And if not, why not?
Well, we want people to have expertise. So when you say related to the system, I mean, for example, this emergency room physician is somebody.
I'm speaking about from other states.
Oh, okay. I think what we do, we're perfectly capable of handling it within Minnesota. We can call on other states, other expertise as the task force determines it's necessary. But I would expect all the members are going to be Minnesotans.
Are there any other questions on this topic?
Yeah.
About $36 million in funding has been cut from child services. Are there any plans in the short term to restore any of that funding?
That's $36 million over the last 10 years, really from the block grants that provide for child protection that have been cut across 10 years. That is one of the reasons that one of the first three things we were asking the task force to look at is the resources and capacity, and having those preliminary recommendations made by the end of December so that they are in front of the governor and legislature well before the next session. Understanding that the balance of the recommendations of the task force don't need to be made until the end of March. But I think the reason for having that more up front is really so that people can look at those recommendations before the legislature is in session.
I think both commissioners are right that we should wait and get a more objective evaluation. I have heard anecdotally for the last several years from individual county workers that they are underfunded and understaffed, especially relative to what are in many cases rising incidents of reported and suspected child abuse. So I think one big question for the task force is whether our present system and the capacity that we've funded and provided is sufficient to the increasing demands. And similarly, the good question was asked about the welfare of children after those incidents have been investigated and found to have validity. What are the resources available for temporary or permanent foster care and protection, and what do we need to do to strengthen that?
Commissioner, is this standard, the way Minnesota does it, having counties deliver this service? Are there any states you know of that, are there any states that you know of that actually just do this directly instead of having the counties do the protocol?
Minnesota is one of 12 states across the country that are state supervised but county administered human services system. So I think that answers your question. There are other states that do it our way. There's some other states that do it much more directly.
This way?
Yeah. Overall, when I look at our human services system, I think having county workers that are closer to the people that they serve, especially for something that is as high touch as child protection, has served our state well. But obviously, as a system, we need to look at how we can make it even better.
Anything else? Okay.
Well, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
See it in the last letter, but you're welcome to escape it. All right, anything else?
Governor, you're going to attend the AFL-CIO convention this afternoon, and I'd like to know what you're going to tell them, and also respond to Republican critics who say that you are doing what the unions want you to do.
Well, I look at what I intend to do and what I can accomplish for Minnesota through the lens of what I think is best for the state of Minnesota and all of its citizens, not one particular group within the state, and I'll continue to make my decisions on that basis. And as to what I'll say this afternoon, stay tuned. I'm going to recount, as I have at some of the other gatherings, some of the important successes I think we've achieved over particularly the last 2 years, and remind people of the dire straits that we encountered when we took office almost 4 years ago, and say that, as I promised in 2012, if we had a DFL governor and DFL legislature, we'd deliver progress, and I think we have, and we have a lot more to do. We have a lot more people who still need to be employed, but the increase in jobs in the construction industry and other areas affecting AFL-CIO and affecting the state of Minnesota, the overall economic growth is something I'm going to highlight.
Governor, you caused some alarm within the labor ranks when you suggested earlier this summer that the minimum wage law may need to be reviewed for potential changes regarding restaurant workers. Have you given any more thought to that?
I haven't, to be honest. I haven't given much thought to specific pieces of legislation because it's presumptuous on my part to assume that I'm going to be around. And next year, I tell audiences that a year from now I'll either be in Bowabic or Bolivia. And I'm not going to presume on either one of those outcomes until the people of Minnesota decide.
Governor, on Sunday, the StarTribune did a piece about community action in Minneapolis, a nonprofit that the state has given significant resources to. Should the state do a better job of vetting nonprofits before it allows these grants? And perhaps Commissioner, you want to take those 2 cents district?
Well, we're meeting on that subject right after this press conference. So it was very concerning, and from everything I know, is far away from the norm in terms of how these agencies conduct themselves, which are at the community level, very close to the citizens, very close to people in poverty or struggling in every way possible to provide assistance to them. And so I was first personally really appalled at what was said there, recognizing that there may be other sides to the story, but we are going to look at it. I believe the city is going to do the same, and we'll talk with the city as well to see if we coordinate our initiatives. But I take it very seriously. Yeah, if you want.
You asked if there should be more oversight. I just wanted to point out that we did see red flags with this organization, and that's why we did an internal audit. So I think that the audit that is before us, which points out excessive administrative spending and other concerns, is the result of good oversight.
And as to this particular organization, should they receive more state funding?
Well, that will be part of the determination we'll be making, and making very, very quickly, and along with the city as well. But it certainly calls that into serious question.
So it's possible that this particular organization, which spent money on spas and trips and car lease, could get more state funding in a second Dayton administration?
Well, again, we haven't had a chance to conduct the internal review. The story's been out for I've been aware of the story for 24 hours, so and it was a Sunday. So, give us an opportunity here to converse among ourselves, to converse with the city. But again, I take it very seriously.
Governor, does it concern you that there are some well-known Democrats, members of your party, who are linked to this board?
I take the whole matter very seriously. I'm be very alarmed if there were Democrats involved would be very alarmed if there were not Democrats involved. The fact that there are people who are placed in positions of responsibility who allegedly, and according to the story, spend public funds inappropriately, and particularly funds that were intended to help people get out of poverty, is very disturbing to me, and political affiliations really are beyond the initial concern.
Commissioner, your department has had this audit for a month. Why hasn't there been a review before we look at it?
Well, the audit was our review. We had a team of internal auditors go out, and after we saw some red flags as far as excessive administrative spending, we did an audit. We met with them on our the exit conference in early June. We listened to what they had to say. We issued a final audit report in early August, but we gave them till September 1st to come up with, they said they had additional documentation they wanted us to look at, to consider, that would explain some of these things. We gave them several weeks to come back with that additional documentation and responses. So we have looked at that as well. So I think we've been taking this very seriously, a step at a time, wanting, if they have additional information that we didn't uncover in our audit that we ought to look at, well, then they ought to have the chance to bring that to our attention. I would say that what we've seen so far has not alleviated the serious concerns we had as a result of the audit.
And last, is this the only nonprofit that you have audited that you have concerns about, or are there millions of dollars that may not be properties?
Well, when we see red flags, we do monitor nonprofits. We try and make sure that we look at not just their spending, really their outcomes as well. Are they meeting the outcomes that we want as far as lifting people out of poverty? When we see noncompliance, we do look into it. One of the things that was in the governor's budget, which the legislature passed, was additional funding for internal auditors at the Department of Human Services so that we would have the capacity to more closely scrutinize how government dollars are spent. And this is just one example of our putting those dollars to use.
Commissioner, does the agency have any flat policy or advice to nonprofits about how much to spend on professional conferences, out of town, things like that? Is there just any guidance given to your nonprofits that get money from you?
Not only is there guidance, we are very clear in our requirements, and our requirements for most of our CAP agencies that we shouldn't spend more than 15% on administrative costs. And if they want to do more than that, they need to get permission for us and justify that. So I think there's very clear guidance on what would be excessive, as well as, can I just say, common sense comes into play here. I think the other thing that this would tell me is that I think nonprofits should look at their boards and oversight. This obviously is an issue here.
Another point I'd make is, the subject come up before about, who's qualified to audit agencies, both government and nonprofit, for their work. And according to the report anyway, this operation was audited on at least some kind of annual basis by a private certified public accountant, which says that the dollars are accounted for within the scheme, but they don't do performance audits, meaning they don't look at the applications of rules and regulations, and they don't look at the percentages and outcomes that have been occurred. And that's the reason why public auditors like the state auditor and the legislative auditor, who have that expertise and who do that regularly, have a far greater ability to make these assessments than private firms that don't have that expertise.
Speaking of spending taxpayer money, your opponent, Jeff Johnson, is really holding your feet to the fire about taxes already being too high in the state of Minnesota. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about the tax code reform that you're proposing?
Well, we've raised taxes on the income taxes on the wealthiest 2% of Minnesotans. So that's the part that conveniently gets left out of his attacks and other attacks. The 98% of people making less than $250,000 a year did not have an income tax increase since I've been governor, and in fact, a couple million of them received income tax reductions because of the federal conformity measures that were adopted in last spring's legislative session. We raised taxes because we faced a projected deficit, and because we still owed the schools a couple $1 billion from previous years, and so we either had to make more drastic cuts in health and human services and education, or we could raise taxes on the wealthiest 2%, which I said from the beginning in my campaign I thought was appropriate from an equity standpoint, and use that money, invest that money in things like early childhood education and all-day kindergarten and tuition freezes at the university.